I was living with my two best friends, Jason and Andrew, in an apartment in the city. We were all in our last year of college, and between classes and work, we didn't have much free time. But when we did, we loved exploring, hiking trails, wandering through random towns, or checking out abandoned places. One weekend, we all had Friday and Saturday off, so we decided to do something different. Andrew had heard about an old decommissioned factory on the outskirts of the city. It sounded interesting, and none of us had ever explored anything like it before. We were a little hesitant, but in the end, we said, why not? And decided to check it out. We drove to the edge of the city in Jason's car. The factory was in this weird, empty area where the city just kind of ends and turns into flat, open land. We didn't have an exact address, but we found it on Google Maps using the satellite view. We parked at a gas station about a block away and walked the rest of the distance. The whole street was deserted. No cars, no people. It felt like the entire block had been abandoned. The factory itself was massive, with rusted railings and graffiti everywhere. The chain link fence around it had barbed wire on top, but in a few spots, it had been cut open. So we squeezed through and made our way to the front door, which was already slightly open. As soon as we stepped inside, I got chills. The whole building was creaking and swaying because of the wind outside. It was pitch black, so we relied on the cheap flashlights Andrew had brought. The main room was filled with huge, rusted machines, and there were narrow pathways between them. We stayed in that room for a while, just looking around. But eventually, I wandered off into a hallway. I checked over my shoulder and saw one of my friends not too far behind me, so I kept going. I reached another metal door and stepped through it. But as the door started closing behind me, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I thought it was Jason or Andrew, so I kept walking and shining my flashlight around the room. There were more machines, like a conveyor belt and a catwalk along the ceiling. I called out my friends' names and turned around, but when my flashlight hit the door, no one was there. I was confused. I knew I'd heard the door open. I started walking back toward the hallway when I heard a faint crumble behind me. I whipped my flashlight around and saw a man standing about 6 or 7 feet away. He looked deranged. Long hair, a messy beard, and these glazed-over eyes. Before I could react, he sprinted at me like he was trying to tackle me. I backed into the hallway, slammed the door shut, and ran as fast as I could. I could hear my friends calling out to me, and when I found them, I yelled for us to leave. We bolted out of the factory, jumped the fence, and didn't stop running until we were back at the car. Whoever that guy was, he'd been waiting for one of us to split off from the group. I don't even want to think about what he might have done if he'd caught me. We haven't tried anything like that since. This last story happened nearly 5 years ago. I was in high school at the time, and my best friend was a guy named Colton. We hung out almost every day after school, and during winter break, we had a lot of free time on our hands. One day, after spending hours playing Xbox at his place, we got bored and decided to go for a walk. Our town had this creepy abandoned church at the end of a deserted road. It had been there for as long as anyone could remember, but no one ever went near it. When we were kids, it terrified us, but for some reason, that night, we felt like checking it out. It was already dark, but the moon was bright enough for us to see where we were going. The road leading to the church was cracked and overgrown with vines and bushes. By the time we reached the church, it looked even creepier than I remembered. The forest had practically swallowed it whole, and the fence around it was barely visible under all the plants. We made our way through a broken section of the fence and walked up to the large entrance door. It creaked loudly as we pushed it open, and the sound echoed through the empty building. The inside was surprisingly untouched. No debris or graffiti, just rows of dusty benches. We walked down the aisle, our footsteps echoing. But when we got closer to the podium, we heard a sudden thud. It echoed through the whole church, and we both froze. We pulled out our phone flashlights and looked around, but we couldn't figure out where the sound had come from. Colton thought he saw another room near the entrance, so we headed over there. It looked like a storage room, with chairs stacked against the wall and boxes everywhere. While we were in there, we heard footsteps coming from the main hall. We froze, staring out the crack in the doorway, and saw someone walk past the entrance and out the front door. We waited in silence for a few minutes. They came from. It still gives me chills thinking about it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be back soon with